Well, thank you, Dr. Desai, for inviting me to be here today, and it's really an honor to be back here on campus. I was telling some people last night, it's probably been 20 years since I've been back here, so it really is exciting to kind of see the changes that have taken place and also be here with you all today. I don't do a lot of presentations at academic institutions. Most of what I do is with the business community. So I thought what I would do today, and let's figure out how this works, is start with a quiz. Because I know you're all students, you've studied, you understand who the lecturer is today, so we're going to do a little quiz. Let's see a hand go up. Anybody have any idea when the first Rose Parade was held? Haha, you guys got stumped on a quiz here today, right? Take a guess.
Between 1875 and 1904.
It's not fair, not fair. It would be 1890. So this year will be the 130th anniversary of the Rose Parade. What about the football game, Rose Bowl game? Any idea when the first Rose Bowl game was held? And what year now, what would be the anniversary year that we're holding for the game? How long has football been around? Anybody have an idea? A little over 100 years. So this will be the 105th Rose Bowl game that we'll be playing this year. So on January 1st, 2019 will be the 105th Rose Bowl game. Any idea? Sports guys, granddaddy of them all. Who's heard that term? Raise your hand if you heard granddaddy of them all. No. Keith Jackson, right? Keith Jackson is the one that coined granddaddy of them all. Sportscaster for ABC for many, many years, did Olympic broadcasts, always did a lot of college football, and coined that term that we use today. So before I do, we're going to try some technology and see if this works. Just show a quick little video here.
On behalf of the Tournament of Roses, we hope you enjoy a wonderful day and take home treasured memories. The Grand Marshal for the 2018 Rose Parade, Tournament of Roses, Mr. Gary Sinise. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you the 2018 Tournament of Roses Royal Court. It is my privilege and honor to crown you as the 100th Rose Queen.
Opening number was sick.
The group has active choreography of all Japanese marching bands, and let me tell you, it shows.
They bring high fives, shall I say high hoofs?
High hopes. Can't think of a better way to bring in the new year.
Estados Unidos hasta Afganistán.
Andy Grammer puts a nice button on the end of it.
What a way to wrap it up.
Corner of the end zone, it's caught, touchdown! Looked over the middle, now dumps it down, caught, touchdown, Michelle! Rodney Anderson crashing forward through the end zone, touchdown! Overshoots Andrews, and it's intercepted.
So So what I thought I'd do today, first is just give you a little bit of background history on the tournament, who we are and what we do. Again, in the video you saw different images, some of the things you might be familiar with, obviously the parade and the football game, but other things you might not be familiar with what we do throughout the year. So we'll start with the history, kind of go through kind of our program of work, and then I really want to kind of focus on what's happening in our industry, the disruption that we're facing, the changes that we have to encounter, and how we're dealing with those changes to move forward and be successful in the future. So the history, again, the tournament was founded back in 1890. It was really founded by an organization called the Valley Hunt Club in Southern California, and it was really just a day to celebrate the weather of Southern California, promote Southern California. That's how it started. The football game came years later. 1902 was the first football game. It was designed as a game East versus West. You had Stanford play Michigan. They did it in a park in a field. They expected about 1,000 people to show up. More than 10,000 people showed up. They had to call it in the third quarter because there was kind of rowdiness going on in the stands. People were not behaving themselves. And the tournament didn't do another football game for 14 years. Again, football was at its infancy. And they brought it back in 1916. It's been a tradition ever since. So that's why we'll always say the 105th Rose Bowl game. We don't say the 105th annual Rose Bowl game. Some facts about it, again, known as the granddaddy of them all. It's a tri-party agreement. So that tri-party agreement is the Tournament of Roses, the Big Ten Conference, and the Pac-12. So on a traditional Rose Bowl game, we host the top team from the Pac-12 and the Big Ten on New Year's Day. But we're also part of what's called the CFP, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So every third year now, we host a non-traditional game. People also ask about the stadium. The stadium is different than the tournament. Okay, so the tournament is a membership association. We host the Rose Bowl game. We actually built the Rose Bowl stadium, and then we gave it to the city of Pasadena. Again, that first year, 8,000 people showed up. By about year 3 or 4, 50,000 people were showing up. And so they built the stadium based off the Yale Bowl back in Connecticut. Obviously, it's been expanded over the years, and that's kind of our home for our game. So the association, what's called the Tournament of Roses, is a membership association. We produce America's New Year celebration, obviously what we call the Rose Bowl game and the Rose Parade. It's a volunteer organization, so we have tremendous volunteer participation in Southern California. We have people that come from all over the country to help decorate these floats right before New Year's Day. This year my budget is about $115 million, so I manage about a $115 million budget. So with my volunteers, they'll say, oh, we're just a small nonprofit. And I have to talk to them about, no, we're a significant corporation here. And then our economic impact, we do an economic impact every 3 years, a study. Our last one 3 years ago, we had about a $350 million economic impact for the Los Angeles region from our parade and our game. So again, significant economic impact. The mission of the association is pretty simple. We're volunteer driven, we're about bringing people together, and we're about celebrating the new year. That's who we are, and that's what our mission is. And that's then done through our volunteers. So we have 935, sorry for that error on there, but we have 935 volunteers. They're called white suiters. Any idea why they're called white suiters? Has anybody watched the parade on New Year's Day? Volunteers have to wear these white suits. Polyester, they're ugly, they hate them. But it's a tradition that goes back into the 40s, so every year on New Year's Day they put on their white suits and they're out there working the parade. And sometimes it's pretty cold. No coats. They have all these rules and regulations about what they have to look like on New Year's Day. All of our volunteers are assigned to 31 committees, and they serve a 2-year rotation on those committees. And that's going to be something important to remember as I talk about disruption, because I'm not sure that model still works for us as the world changes quickly. And they contribute about an estimated 80,000 volunteer hours in putting together both the parade and the game. And then also we have a full-time staff of about 35, 40 full-time staff that work year-round on putting together our events. We're governed by a 14-member executive committee, of which 8 are in line to move up to be president, okay, or chair of the board. It's the same thing for an association. We call it the president. Again, that's substantial because it takes about 30 years as a volunteer if you were to move up to that president's role. You have to be involved with the organization for about 25 to 30 years. Again, so that takes a huge commitment. So my members are not corporate CEOs. A corporate CEO is not going to wait 30 years to run an organization like a Chamber of Commerce or a convention bureau. These are people that are very passionate about putting on this parade. and putting on the game, and so they spend a lot of time before they move into leadership. I just put this in here because people always ask about this tournament house. Where are you officed? And this is actually where our offices are. We have offices on the back side of this, but this was originally the Wrigley Mansion in Southern California in Pasadena. The Wrigley's chewing gum factory, chewing gum mogul, had homes all across the country, and his wife, Ada, loved to spend Christmas and New Year's in Pasadena, and so the parade would line up in front of this house every year. So when she passed back in the 1940s, the family donated that home to the city of Pasadena with the intent that the tournament always be based there to continue putting on the parade every year. So it's really, it's an amazing facility if you're ever in Pasadena. So let me talk about our two major product lines, the Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl game. So the Rose Parade, it's presented by Honda. So Honda is my sponsor on this. It is the oldest and largest floral parade. That's what we are, is a floral parade, and that's what you saw on the floats on the video. We currently have around 700 to 1 million spectators that line the streets of Pasadena every year to watch the parade. And that's a 5.5 mile parade route. So again, that's going to be another significant point I'm going to come back to as we talk about disruption, 5.5 miles. We have about 85 to 90 units that we say is in the parade. The parade moves at 1.5 miles per hour down the street. We're on a 2-hour telecast. We can get about 85 to 90 units in front of those television cameras. And the parade is really 3 major items. It's floats, floral floats, it's equestrian units, it's bands. We don't have balloons, we're not Macy's Day Parade, we don't have clowns, it's not what we are. Again, our tradition is those 3 items. We do have an opening show, a closing show, and we're also known for our flyover. We have a very close relationship with the Pentagon, so we're all, every year, able to do a B-2 flyover on both the parade and the game. You saw in the video the B-2 quickly flying over the stadium there. What do these floats look like? So we do not, the tournament does not build floats. We have float building companies that we work with, that we approve, and then we have float building facilities. I own 3 separate large industrial buildings in Southern California. So I'm also involved in real estate. We just bought a 110,000 square foot warehouse last year for over $15 million where we build these floats. But they're really, if you look up there, it's really a chassis, simple chassis, that they then build this infrastructure around it, the cocoon. It's then covered in this material, what I would call plastic or rubberized material that you see that kind of down here on the bottom. And then eventually that is painted, and then the flower and displays are put onto that material. Again, my first day on the job, and I was doing a tour, and I saw these little vials, and thousands, I mean, huge carts of them. And I thought, what are we doing here? Is there like drug smuggling going on? Or what are all these vials here for? Well, if you think about it, that flower would die if you just put it onto that material. So every single flower has to be inserted into a vial. So again, volunteers, that's why it takes so long to decorate these things. The flowers need to last about a week because it takes 2 or 3 days to decorate. You have the parade on the 4th day. Then we have kind of a festival event for 2 days after. So about 5 to 6 days, the flowers need to survive. As far as bands go, we have about 100 high school marching bands that apply every year. Again, we take about 20 bands in the parade. It's through an application process. It really is life-changing. Has anybody here been in marching band, high school? A few of you? I mean, that's a whole subgroup, right? And for these kids, they spend hours and hours and hours practicing. They have to, be able to march 5.5 miles. They have to raise money. It's not cheap. It's about $2,000 per person for a high school band to travel to Pasadena. But they get to perform in front of 1 million people. It's pretty amazing when you turn that corner and you see this sea of people down the street, and what life-changing moments that can mean for some of these students. So we're very excited about, again, the 5,000 to 6,000 band students that will participate in the parade every year. And then last is the equestrian units. Again, since the history, the parade started as horse-drawn carriages. Equestrian has always been part of what we do. We still have a multitude of equestrian units that participate in the parade every year. We also have our ambassadors as part of the parade. So our Grand Marshal, again, that's a tradition going back to the early 1900s. This past year on the video, you saw it was Gary Sinise. The Grand Marshal is selected by the president. Every year there is a theme for the parade and tries to select a Grand Marshal that kind of embodies that theme. Last year it was Making a Difference. Gary Sinise and his foundation has done amazing work for veterans, first responders, those type of things. And so he tied very closely into the theme. We've had past presidents. We've had inanimate animals like Mickey Mouse and Kermit the Frog. It really varies on who we've had as Grand Marshals. You also saw in the video, then we also have a royal court. These are young women from the Pasadena area. We have about 1,000 young women that come and try out for Queen and Court every year. It's about a month-long tryout process. It's basically done just through interviews, a very extensive interview process that is then narrowed down to a court of 7. One of those is eventually selected as queen, and they become ambassadors for the tournament and do appearances throughout the community for about 3 to 4 months around the parade. So that's the parade side. On the game side, again, presented by Northwestern Mutual, my title sponsor, the Rose Bowl game. What I've got here, I'm going to show you statistics from 2 different games. 2017 was a traditional Rose Bowl game. Big Ten, Pac-12, USC, Penn State. Had about 16 million viewers on television, sold out game, about 95,000 attendees in the stadium. What's significant here is when I started, we do payouts to the conference, right? After the game, we pay all the expenses. The proceeds of the game, what's left over is distributed back to the conferences for distribution to the universities. Big Ten, Pac-12, or in a CFP year, the schools that are playing in that game. Last year, 2017, I had them tabulate, go back, how much have we paid out? Since 1975, the Tournament of Roses has paid out over $1 billion to America's colleges and universities. I said, why do we not talk about that? Oh, the conferences don't want us talking about it because they don't want to be questioned on where the money goes. I said, that's not their problem. That's not my problem. That's their problem. I need people to know what we're doing to support students just like you, right? $1 billion that we've paid off. I don't think there's another association out there that has done something as significant as that. Last year, in fact, we were a CFP game. I just did a wire transfer last week, $95 million I sent back. So again, the Rose Bowl game that year, 2017, we paid out $35 million. That was again divided between that was $35 million to each Pac-12 and $35 million to the Big Ten. Then we're also part of what's called the CFP College Football Playoff. That's the playoff series with the top 4 teams in the country. So last year, or this year, the 2018 game was a CFP semifinal game. That's where either number 1 and 4 or 2 and 3 play to advance to the championship game. We had OU and Georgia. Again, it was a first-time double overtime game, and again, the payout was over $95 million on that game. So again, very successful for us. And then we have these additional events that we do. You kind of saw some of the stuff in the video that people don't even realize what we do. So deck places, that is where the decorating is taking place. Again, floats are being built today. That material, the rubber material is all being assembled today. There's animation that goes on these floats, so hydraulics and lifts. There's pyro. There's all kinds of things that go on these floats. Last year we also had our first augmented reality. So if you could wear the little device, all of a sudden you saw fish that were flying up over a bridge. All that is taking place today, but the decorating doesn't take place until, like I said, a few days beforehand. But we have tours. And so we allow people to come in and actually tour, revenue generator for us. We charge $15. We have somewhere around 35,000 people that came through this year just to watch and see how these floats are decorated. So again, anybody here, if you want to come out to Southern California and volunteer to decorate floats, absolutely, we welcome you. You can go to the website and hit the button and volunteer, and they'll reach out to you and invite you out to do that. We also do what's called Equest Fest. Again, equestrian units have been a huge part of the parade, so we do an equestrian show at the LA Equestrian Center every year. And again, there's a whole segment of society I'm back in Kansas, right? That's about horses and horse shows and those type of things. So all the units that are in the parade participate in this event. Who knew? I was there last year again. It was my first year, and Carson Kressley. Do you know who Carson Kressley is? Was television personality and those type of things, was the MC for the event. I thought, what is Carson Kressley doing as an MC for an equestrian event? Turns out he's a huge horse person and works with a group out of San Diego, and so rides horses and shows horses and all those type of things. So you just never know who's going to be interested in these type of events. We also do an event called Band Fest. Again, we've got 23 bands from across the country, both the college bands from the universities that are participating as well as the high schools. And so we do 3 days of field shows. And again, if you've been in band, these band kids love to perform, love to show off their shows. And so there's 3 days of shows that are going on, again, prior to the parade. And we sell those out. The stadium that we use at Pasadena City College holds about 10,000 people. It's sold out for 3 days with people coming out to watch these band shows. We also have our Hall of Fame around the Rose Bowl game. We've had a Hall of Fame since the early 1980s, and every year we induct 3 or 4 individuals into the Hall of Fame. Somebody like Keith Jackson as a radio or a announcer has been inducted. Last year, John Mack from the University of Texas was in there. Cade McNown, former quarterback from UCLA, was inaugurated into the Hall of Fame. We also inaugurated posthumously the first African American quarterback to play in the game from Jefferson. Jefferson University back in on the East Coast, a small liberal arts school back on the East Coast. And then we also last year, and we'll talk about this in a minute, we started a new event that we call the Rose Bowl Bash. Again, people think everything's in Pasadena. The parade's in Pasadena, the game is in Pasadena. And since I've been there, I'm telling the story that we're a Southern California asset. We're not just about Pasadena. We put both of our teams in downtown LA. Their bands are in downtown LA, so their team hotels are in downtown LA. So we have about 30,000, 40,000 people that are coming into the game that are all centered in downtown LA. So I said, why are we not doing an event downtown LA to provide activities for these folks, again, and drive revenue? So we created a new event, Rose Bowl Bash. Again, we get into all kinds of issues of licensing with the CFP and what we can do and can't do. So this was our first attempt to do something like that. It was a 4-hour event, 4 or 5-hour event, and we had more than 10,000 people show up just to go to our event. So again, opportunity for us in the future. We're going this year to expand that to a 2-day event. Obviously, we're selling sponsorships around that to drive revenue, and really look forward to what the future holds on that. And then last is what we call post-parade. So after the parade, all the floats are actually parked in this display area at the end of the route. And for 2 days, anybody can just come by and view the floats. And you get very close, hands-up look at what the floats are. Animation is working on those floats. In a year where we do a 2-day event this past year, we had about 75,000 people show up at $15 a pop just to view the floats. And if we do a 3-day, when it's over a weekend, we'll have over 100,000 people show up. So what's key there is I look at how do we expand our program of work and drive revenue for the association. I'm in a really enviable position because I have crowds. I'm not trying to start an event and then attract an audience. Everything I do has audience. And what the tournament has not done is maximize those events. And so that's the fun part of my job now, is looking at what those opportunities are. So again, very important to us then is our broadcast. So on the parade, we're not a single broadcast network. We're one of the very few events left in the country that have multiple broadcasters. Did anybody watch the parade this year? Just raise your hands if you watched the parade. So a good number. Did anybody watch it on Amazon Prime? Raise your hands. Only one? Okay, we'll talk in just a sec. So we have, again, going back to the 60s and the 70s, been able to maintain a format of multiple broadcast audience. So ABC, NBC, you'll see who our partners are up there, Univision, Spanish language, RFD TV, which is the Rural Farm Network. We have a variety of broadcasters. Then last year, again, the world is changing. We're going to talk about this as we talk about disruption. Young people are streaming. They're not watching NBC and ABC, so how do I reach young people? And so we were able to do a partnership with Amazon Prime. And they did a live stream of the parade, but they did it as part of a comedy show. So Will Ferrell and Molly Shannon, part of Funny or Die. And what was interesting is a lot of people didn't realize that's what it was. So people are watching the stream and their feedback about, why are they talking all the time? They need to shut up and let me see the floats. But the young people that knew it was a comedy show thought it was hilarious. On social media, they're making fun of the old people that didn't get it. And all of a sudden, there's this whole social exchange going on. And then, of course, over the month that went on, then there was this whole viral thing about, oh my God, you got to watch this broadcast. And so the numbers went off the chart on people that watched the show on Amazon Prime. We'll talk a little bit about this because this was a huge risk on the part of my leadership to do something like this. If you look at the numbers, though, we still have extraordinary numbers. Our households, you'll see for 2018, we had almost 31 million households watch the parade, And we had more than 44 million people that watched it, individuals. And I'm going to give you some numbers on other shows when we talk about disruption, and keep those in mind. So we still have really strong, while other network shows have declined, ours has remained pretty constant and pretty steady. This kind of gives you a breakdown. You can see ABC is kind of the market leader. Obviously, we're very close with ABC Disney. ESPN is part of the Disney family. They broadcast. That is a single broadcast of the game, so we're very close. But you can see how the other ones break down: NBC, Univision, Hallmark Channel. And then important to us is also just the Southern California reach. KTLA is kind of the local station in Los Angeles area. It's broadcast the parade for 40 years since television started. And you can see they still have about a reach of almost 3 million people and more than 1.7 million households in Southern California. Again, these are key for as I try and sell sponsorships, as I try and develop those partnerships about what are the audiences that we're able to reach with our messaging. And then international, we also distribute the parade internationally. Again, if you think about New Year's Day, it can be shown live through North America and South America. That time zone really works. Europe, you're almost at the end of New Year's Day when it would show, and obviously Asia, you've already missed New Year's Day. So we do a lot of streaming with that, or they will show the prior year's parade on New Year's Day. But we are distributed to about 220 countries around the world, and our market there is around 28 million international viewers that we have on the parade. So again, as I talk with our leadership, we're a global asset. We're not just domestic. We are global in what we do. So let's talk about leading through change, because there's a lot of change that's going out there that's impacting us. And as I came into this job, one of the things they said to me is, we need to change. And I would ask, well, what does that mean? And I really couldn't get an answer about what it was that we needed to change. But they knew they needed to change. So, one of the things, I have this on my wall at my office. I was reading an article by Gary Kelly, CEO of Southwest Airlines. I'm just always fascinated with him and kind of his leadership. And he talks about 5 characteristics of effective leader. 1, you got to care, right? Leadership is about people. The task part is easy. The human part is a little bit more difficult. So you've got to care. You've got to listen. You've got to be part of your team. And so that was really important as I started implementing changes at the tournament, what we're going to do. Again, you got to communicate. Listen and respect other opinions. The most important thing is if you don't communicate with staff, then they don't feel valued. They don't know what's going on, and there's a lot of confusion. And so that was also very important as we started making changes. Again, you got to have character. It is about integrity. It's about respect. It's about honesty. Again, as you're going through these type of changes, that's really important. 1, you got to know your stuff, right? You got to be competent. And to be honest, I don't know that much about a parade. I'm not a parade expert at all. On some of the other things, I don't know what we do, but I've got really good people that do, and my philosophy is I empower them to do their jobs and then let them do it and hold them accountable for whatever that area of responsibility is, and I think that's key for a leader. And the last one is, you got to have courage. And let me tell you, it takes a lot of courage sometimes when you're making these changes to step out on that limb and not play it safe. But if I played it safe, if I came into this role and did what the tournament had been doing for the past 5, 10, 15 years, I can tell you we will not be in business in 25 years. The world's changing too quickly around us. We won't be in business. So I say in here, we're successful despite ourselves. Okay? Again, my overall budget is $115 million. Last year I had a profit of about $2 million for the association. But the Rose Parade itself loses anywhere from $6 to $8 million a year. How is that a sustainable model? I came in and said, wait, how can we do this? Well, that $115 million, $85 million of that is with a television contract with ESPN to broadcast the football game. And we're going to talk about the change that's happening in college football today. If that telecast, if I were to lose that broadcast contract, and it will be up for renewal in 2026, if that goes away, that means I shut down the parade because I can't do it. So that's what I'm looking at, is I'm looking at the challenges that we've got coming forward. So 1, I looked at, do we have a clear vision of who we are as an organization? 2, do we have the structure and the talent to actually operate on that, support that vision? And 3, are we putting the right product out there on the street? Are we putting a product out there that people want? So when you look at the Vision, I asked about it, do we have a strategic plan? Do we have a business plan? Can I see our plans? And the answer was no. And I met with past chairs of the board, and I heard that in 2007 and 2008, they did a 2-year strategic planning process that engaged all their volunteers, yet there was never a plan developed. Think about my volunteers. They serve 2-year assignments, remember? And then we rotate them to another assignment. So who of my volunteers is thinking strategically long term? None of them. They're only worried with the task in front of them. So as an association, the association's only been worried about what's right there in front of them. So I said, and I'm not about hundreds of plans that go into big notebooks and sit on a shelf. I'm not about that. But I do need to know where we're going. So I just worked with our staff and said, you know what? We are going to put together what this strategic plan, the basics of what a strategic plan is and what our goals are. Because I need to have the focus. I need to know when we're stepping off mission and we're getting mission creep and when we are staying on mission. So these are what we came up with, our 5 major goals. 1, we're about bringing people together to serve as a leading volunteer-driven organization. At the heart of the matter, we are a volunteer association. So that's got to be one of our key driving factors, providing value to our volunteers. Number 2, we create these premier events, right, with quality guest experiences that celebrate the hope and joy of the new year. Doesn't say New Year's Day. Hope and joy of the new year. That gives me flexibility as I try and expand our program of work and drive revenue, that I'm not locked into saying, oh, we're only about New Year's Day. Because some of my volunteers would say that, oh, we're just about New Year's Day. 3, grow the tournament's impact. That's sustainability. That's me driving revenue. That's me maximizing revenue. That's me being able to pay bills, right? I've got to grow us, that we have the resources we need. Enhance our legacy of community support. I didn't really go into that with any of my other slides, but obviously we have a huge legacy of investing in our community. We have a foundation that annually contributes. Over the past 10 years, we've probably invested more than $30 million in nonprofits and other community associations in the Pasadena area, in addition to the $1 billion that we've supported to colleges and universities. And then the 5th goal was around our brand. We have a really strong brand. I mean, when you do surveys, when you do market research, when people say Tournament of Roses, Rose Bowl game, Rose Parade, those brands are held up here. And so we have to guard that and safeguard that. We've got to change and we've got to modernize, but we don't want to ruin our brand. So this was the original organizational structure I came into. We had a CEO, and there were 3 basic divisions, and they were called chiefs. We had a chief operating officer, chief financial officer, and they called the person that ran the game the chief administrative officer. There was nothing to do with the CAO, but he was the chief administrative officer. And the first day there, I had my assistant came to me and said, David, do you want to meet with the chiefs? I said, what's a chief? In my mind, I'm going to come back to Kansas. You have chiefs, you have Indians, you have all that. I just hated that terminology. And I said, absolutely not. 1, I'm going to create a leadership team. I need everybody at the table that plays into this. And we have about 9 or 10 different divisions. So I want a leadership team with representatives from each of those. So I did a restructuring, and this is what the restructuring came back. Again, these are our key market divisions. Obviously, the Rose Bowl game. I created what's called a parade development office. The tournament, for all these years, when we did a parade, can you believe this, that equestrian units and bands were done underneath a staff member in membership. The Grand Marshal and Royal Court was done underneath somebody in marketing communications. Float sales were done by somebody in what we call strategic partnerships. The opening closing show was done by somebody in operations. And they never talked to each other. And there was nobody in charge. So basically what we were doing is everybody worked in their little isolated areas, did their work, and at the end of the day, a week before, we kind of spit up all the work that we've done, and that's the parade we put out onto the street. There was no strategy about what we wanted it to look like, what the elements of it were. So a parade development office I created. I hired the former CEO of Macy's Day Parade. She had retired, mid-50s. I said, and we had a long conversation. We'd been meeting over time. She is now running that parade development office. And then the third thing was just the product. Do we have the right product? The Rose Parade, the Rose Bowl game, and our association, do we have those? So we had to take a really deep look at those. So let's talk about the disruption. I just want to run through some headlines. Remember I talked about what our ratings were doing. Ours 44 million holding. Look at that. Grammys this year, lowest ratings in history. Oscars, lowest ratings in history. Olympic audience shrinks. What is happening with television shows? People are not watching linear shows. They are consuming in a different way, and we don't have a method yet to know how to rank that consumption. What does that pay for me as a television show? I'm really concerned with this. Let's talk about football. Anybody see the headlines in football? Is football going to be around in 20 years? The whole concussion issue, the NFL kind of really stumbled through that. Moms not wanting their kids to play football, we'll put them into soccer. What does that say for the football, and I'll say football industry? Okay, there is football there. I think there is a future for football, but it's going to be drastically different than what it is today. Again, I have an $85 million contract. What's that going to do for me? I'm scared, right? And then let's talk about terrorism. Let's talk about Las Vegas, what happened in New York. I'm a tier 1 event, highest rated event for terrorist activities. So how is that impacting me? So that's what I want to talk about here as we talk about disruption. And then finally, Toys R Us, going out of business, right? I grew up with Toys R Us. I hear my volunteers say, well, the Rose Parade will always be here. No, the Rose Parade will not always be here. If we don't change, we will not be here. And so that's what I'm working with our leadership on, is just the world is changing around us. So we'll go through 3 scenarios here. One is how disruption affects the Rose Parade. 1, escalating costs. Any idea how much it costs to build a float? Just to put a float out on the street? 100,000? $1 million? Didn't cost, one float doesn't cost millions, but it is minimum for a basic float is $300,000. You want to do animation, you want to do pyro, you want to put a band on top of that float, there's another couple $100,000. So now you're talking about $500,000. It's a lot of money. What companies are out there ready to pay $500,000? Again, we've talked about how chambers how they view television and the broadcast. We're still doing linear broadcast in a digital world. Young people here are consuming everything on their phones, their tablets. It's on the go. They're not sitting down in front of a television set and watching a 2-hour show. Again, the terrorism threats that I mentioned, right? Huge concern for us. Also entertainment value. Again, it used to be a pretty float went down the street and that was entertaining. Today, young people, you're bombarded by all kinds of stimuli. You see a pretty float, within 2 or 3 seconds, you're like, I'm done with that. What else can I see, right? So how do I increase the entertainment value of what we're putting out there on the street? And then sponsors. I depend a lot on sponsorship dollars, and what sponsors want from me has changed dramatically. It used to be a logo we want to associate with your brand. Those days are gone. Now it's about metrics. How am I driving customers to them, and how do I measure it? How can I prove that their $1 million investment in me is driving business to them? We weren't prepared for these things. So here's how we're trying to do that. 1, I mentioned the Parade Development Office. That is strictly, I've hired people from the entertainment industry to help put this parade together, so when we put something out on the street, it's through the view of entertainment asset. Extremely important. 1, the partnership with Amazon Prime. So did you enjoy the broadcast? Yeah. Was it funny? Hilarious. Okay, it was Will Ferrell playing this Court guy and Molly Shannon playing Tish, and it was this whole banter between Court and Tish. We just asked they don't talk negatively about anything in the parade. They did pretty good. They stayed on script for the most part. They did kind of bash one float because it was like Riverside, California, and it's kind of the meth capital, and they kind of talked about the meth capital, and that was probably not good. And so my leadership was like, oh, we just don't know about this. But here's what happened. Their 16, 17, 18-year-old kids are like, oh my God, that's great. Kids that would never have watched a parade watched a parade. And so all the parents now are hearing about, oh my God, my kids love the parade. And we introduced them to something they would never watch before. So we're going to do a partnership again with Amazon Prime, and the goal this year is that we do both a digital, a Funny or Die type of broadcast, but a traditional broadcast as well. Again, focus on social media. Again, taking elements of the parade, taking elements of the game through social media, so you can get that 10-second, 20-second clip. You're not going to watch an entire parade, but we can introduce you to it through those type of things. We didn't have an app. I got there, so what's our app look like? What do you mean an app? I said, well, an app. Let's make it easy for people to get here. Where do you park? Where are the bathrooms? Where's your seating? We do an opening and closing show with talent that we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on, but unless you sit in one grandstand at the corner of Orange Grove and Colorado, you never see it. So why can we not stream that opening and closing show on the app? So even if you're sitting 3 miles down the parade route, you know at 8 o'clock you can watch the opening show. So did a lot of work on app development, again, to get information to people in a much better way. I also asked about a VIP experience. What's our VIP experience? And the answer was, well, in this grandstand, we serve hot chocolate and coffee and Krispy Kreme donuts. If you know anything about business, you've got different market segments. There are people that will pay for a VIP experience. So again, I was told, I don't know if that's going to work. Well, we'll do it on a beta. We'll test it. So we worked with IMG. We sold a sponsorship to a company. We did a tent behind a grandstand, opened at 5 o'clock in the morning, cocktails, full buffet, food, television, all of that. Sold it out. $400 a person, 150 seats, sold. So this year now we're going to expand that to probably 500 seats. So again, just looking at the market and how do we meet some market demands. And then data collection, that's the other thing. We never collected data. I sell 35,000 tickets to post-parade. I've got 60,000 tickets sold to the football game. I have no idea who those people are. Now we're collecting that data that we can share that with our sponsors. Again, do promotions that help them hit those metrics they want. The Rose Bowl game, what about the game? Well, again, football's under attack. I already talked about that. The CTE challenges. Decline in football participation and support. Not as many kids. If you read the newspapers up in the northeast part of the country, schools are having combined teams because they just don't have enough kids coming out for football. Football is strong in Texas, it's strong in the South, but it's waning everywhere else. What does that mean for me? ESPN is my broadcast partners. They lost, 30 million subscribers or whatever it was last year? What does that mean for me? Again, disruption. And then the rising costs of securing that stadium. Okay, I'm always having to deal with it. So how do we address some of these things? One, we went to 3-tiered pricing, that we'd only ever done 2-tier pricing in the Rose Bowl Stadium. Basically, we have 60,000 seats in the bowls, 40,000 seats in between the goal lines. It was 2 prices. So if you sat on the goal line, you were paying the same price as if you were sitting on the 50-yard line. Doesn't make sense to me. So we went to 3-tier pricing. Guess what? We drove huge amount of revenue and we still sold out the game. People will pay for what they, for quality or the perceived value of that. We also, one of the issues that we have, and again, part of our brand is on New Year's Day, 2 o'clock, that game goes live, we have a sold out stadium. Even if it's not sold out, we will fill that stadium. So that's just a little secret. We will have a full stadium. And so one of the things is loading 100,000 people into a stadium in about an hour, hour and a half is really, really difficult. So one of the things we did, we had a fan fest. We said, well, why don't we take the fan fest and do security as you go into the fan fest? So we'll take them through the metal detectors and the bag searches before, at 10 o'clock when it opens, and then they're in a secured area. So we were able to put 30,000 people that bought tickets for this fan fest, and they just walked into the stadium. So they didn't have to stop and go through metal detectors and bag searches. So we were able to load the stadium much, much quicker. So again, guaranteed us, we went live at 2 o'clock, stadium was full. Again, one of the things we've been around for a long time is that history, that 100-year history of the bowl game. We're the only bowl game that's been along. So you'll see in our broadcast, we highlight that history. That's that granddaddy of them all. And then again, I talked about the Rose Bowl Bash. And the last thing I want to talk about is the association. Again, disruption for my association. Remember, 951 volunteers that put all this stuff together. Again, we're a volunteer-driven organization, but millennials aren't joiners, right? They're not interested in joining an association. They're not joining Kiwanis and Optimists and those type of things. I mean, we really struggle with that. Time poverty. Volunteers used to be able to give lots of time to volunteer and help us. We're all have that time crunch. That 2-year rotation I talked about. That's a real challenge for us because it's a very short-term focus and it complicates knowledge transfer, right? You did this really well for 2 years, and now you go over here and the next guy comes in behind you and doesn't know what worked and what didn't work. So we have some really strong challenges with the association. So one, the utilization of social media platforms for member recruitment. Again, we've got to go to the markets where these young people are. We have to go to diverse markets where these people are. We cannot wait for people to come to us. And up until this past year, the tournament just waited for people to come to them. We've been lucky. We still hit our volunteer numbers, but again, we've got to be more aggressive moving forward. Again, new year-round member programs. Again, once they join, if they're not going to do anything until December, January, what are they doing for the other 10 months of the year? We've got to have programming that keeps them engaged as volunteers. So we've launched a whole series of programming for our membership, and that comes out of my experience in working with chambers of commerce as membership organizations. Again, On the professional staff side, I have to recruit better talent. I just need more qualified people working for me that come from the perspective that I think we need, and that's about we're entertainment assets. And then coming in, I had to just address real nuts and bolts things with my professional staff. You know, our benefit plans and how we were structured, those type of things. That was just, you know, simple crossing T's and dotting I's of basics that had to be addressed really quickly to kind of move this staff and move them to look at doing work differently. So that's kind of what we're doing at the Tournament of Roses, who we are, what we're doing, the challenges that we face, and how we're trying to address those challenges. So I'd be happy to take any questions that you all have. You know, my favorite part is, again, taking something from nothing and building it into something. It's what I used to call the art of the deal, and that was a Donald Trump thing, so I don't say that as much. But it is that, you know, you have a vision, and you work with the team to try and figure out how do you put this together, then you go through those steps to make it happen, and at the end of the day, you see out there on the street what you've done. You know, I was never somebody that could work in a job where I never saw the output, right? I have to see some output of what my work is. So that's the best part of what I do. On New Year's Day, when I see 1 million people out there on the streets, and you see that joy and that laughter from these little kids, or you hear people talking about how wonderful it is, that's what we're about. We're about bringing hope and joy to the new year. That's what we do. So the issue so the question is about the Big Ten Pac-12 relationship and then switching also the CFP. Underneath, if you remember before the CFP, it was the BCS. Underneath the BCS model, we did a traditional Rose Bowl game on New Year's Day, and then a week later was a championship game, and we hosted 2 or 3 of those BCS championship games. That wasn't working for college football, so they went to this model of the top 4 teams. Everybody wants, you know, a playoff system. So what the CFP said is, well, what we'll do is take the major 6 bowl games, the New Year's 6 as they call them. So it's the Rose Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Peach Bowl, and Orange. And we're going to rotate those playoff between those 6 bowl games. So every 3rd year then is a CFP year. It was important for the Rose Bowl that we not be cut out of that, right? Again, we have to maintain our relevancy. So we needed to be part of that process. Not that we like it, because it's a much greater financial risk on our side when we host a CFP game. In a traditional Rose Bowl game with Big Ten Pac-12, it's a guaranteed sellout. The schools buy the tickets, it's a sellout. In a CFP, the schools only are required to buy half of the tickets, 12,500, and we don't know if those teams are going to travel to Pasadena. We don't have a relationship with those teams. So it's a huge risk for us on a CFP game. Again, this year was amazing for us. OU hadn't been in our game since 2003. Georgia hadn't played in the Rose Bowl since 1943 or something. I don't know, it was 75 years. So they traveled heavily, and so we sold that game out. But we were scared for it. But the reason that we're part of that CFP model is we need to be relevant. We look at ourselves as the top of that food chain when it comes to bowl games. There's 42 bowl games out there. In my opinion, 20 of them could go away. They're just clutter. But I can't be the one to say that to them. So that's why we did that's why we're part of the CFP model. You know, if they go to an 8-team playoff, I'm really scared. If they go to an 8-team playoff, that means the best teams that I can have in my game are number 9 and 10. When again, the Rose Bowl game typically would attract top 4 teams. You know, usually the winner of the Big Ten was somewhere in the top 5, and Pac-12 was usually in the top 5. So if they go to an 8-game playoff, what's that do to my game? Again, disruption. So you can understand why on the backside, working with the National Football Foundation, the NCAA, we're opposed to an 8-team playoff. No, so we don't have a backup plan. Again, I'm okay to 2026 because I've got a contract with ESPN at $85 million. But that's why I have 7-8 years to get this parade sustainable. I've got to figure out how to either reduce our expenses or increase our revenues by that $6 to $8 million mark to make it sustainable. Oh yeah, back in the history of the tournament was never just about a parade and a football game. It was chariot races, it was tug of war pulls, it was all kinds of things. So we're looking at maybe we want to host an international rugby match at the Rose Bowl Stadium. We're looking at all kinds of alternatives of what we can do. And because I'm not just about New Year's Day, I'm about the hope and joy, that gives me flexibility. We've looked at doing a preseason kickoff game. We're looking at all kinds of alternatives on what we might do to expand our platform of work. Yeah, so we work very closely with both local and federal officials on emergency planning, both along the parade route as well as at the stadium. The issue for us with disruption this year with Las Vegas and with what happened in New York, we did two things. One is Las Vegas was obviously a shooter down on people on that 5.5 mile parade route. I've got lots of tall buildings. So we had to, again, expand our security budget working, and we don't do the security. We work with Pasadena Police. We're tier 1, we have Homeland Security, FBI. We had to have snipers on buildings. Hopefully you didn't see them, but we had snipers on buildings looking for that type of activity. We also had to close the parade route 8 hours earlier. We have people that camp out along the parade route. It's like a family tradition, and there used to be cars going up and down Colorado Boulevard. So we had to close that. Again, remember I said 55 or 5.5 miles? We have 55 cross streets, so now I have to barricade 55 cross streets. You can see how my costs have just exponentially gone off the roof. And again, to your point, that's more money. But we have to do it. We have to make sure we provide as safe as an environment for our people as we can. I was concerned whether there would be people come out for the parade this year after what's been going on, and we had a huge turnout. And I think because we did a lot of communication to the public about what we were doing, how we were trying to secure the area, that they felt safe in coming out. And thank goodness nothing happened. Yeah. I think long-term where we're going to, again, it's a weird model, right? I go out, I sell a company a $500,000 deal, and then I turn them over to a third party. And they work with a third party, and then at the end of the day, I have something in my parade. And the float builder would say, that's my client. You don't talk to my client. So we have issues with our float builders, but that's exactly where we're going. We will pretty soon move into the float building business and then contract with builders to do that. We need to control our product. We need to control our assets. Yeah, we have kind of our what we would call our principles of who we are and what we do, and anything we do we would hold up against that. Again, and part of that is we operate in ethical ways and those type of things. But as an organization, I think what we do in facing disruption is, again, I'm not a parade expert. I love college athletics. I don't come from an athletic background of organizing major athletic events. Like I didn't work in the athletic department putting on events for many, many, many years. We're a business. At the end of the day, we're just a business, right? We have revenues, we have expenses, we have clients, we have customers. And so I think the principles that we use, any business can use as they look at disruption and how they handle disruption. I actually went to bed this year. I did get to bed by about midnight, 1 o'clock, and I was up at 4. On New Year's Eve, we have to move these floats. So these floats are built in facilities that are around 20, 25 miles away. And so there's this whole convoy caravan thing that occurs, and they can only move about 5 miles an hour. These, again, they're not huge motors on these things. They move about 5 miles an hour. So it takes around 5, 6, 7 hours to move all these floats. And those convoys start at about 5 o'clock. We go through like 6 or 7 different cities. And so you have to involve the highway patrol, you have to invite the police departments, all those type of things. So they start lining up they start arriving in Pasadena around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. We'll have 35,000 people that just come out and watch this happen. Just people, watch it happen. And so that's how I spent New Year's Eve, was watching all of this happen. And then again, when I started this job, I said, you know what, you don't need my help in getting a parade down the street. For 130 years, this association has lined up a parade and you've gotten it down the street. I'm just gonna muck it up if I get involved with that. You don't need my help. And so I went home, because they don't need my help with that. These volunteers are really well trained. Where they need my help, again, what is the vision, what is the strategy, how are we going to change who we are? And that's what I see my role as. But New Year's Eve, I was just out there watching, and then I went home and went to bed.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
How about